Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds.
Hey, Luke Simons.
Like diamonds. We're talking about three fishing mistakes, in particular, three saltwater fishing mistakes that even experienced anglers make. And we're saying this because we consider ourselves somewhat experienced anglers, and we have still made these same mistakes even recently on a trip we had. So let's dive right in, Luke, and talk about these three mistakes that I really do believe everyone can learn from, not just beginner mistakes or intermediate, but even advanced and experienced anglers sometimes revert back to these and then kick themselves when they realize why they're not catching as many fish.
Yeah, so three things that we all need to have top of mind when we're on the water because just our natural tendencies will make us violate them. So let's go ahead and kick it off with number one, and it is all about depth control. Depth control is crucial throughout the entire year, especially in the wintertime when the fish really aren't going to be traveling all that far. Right? Their metabolism is slow. They don't have to eat as much. They're not generally going to be hungry and they're not comfortable. So if you don't get your lure or your bait, whatever you're using, if you don't get it near them, they're not going to eat it. And we actually had an example. Joe and I were fishing with a member last week, and I pay very close attention to depth control, and I was on a crazy hot bite, like literally like I think it was seven fish in a row, and they were throwing the same area, similar lures, but they caught none. I caught a bunch. But what I did, I had a quarter ounce jig head. I was using a paddle tail like this, quarter ounce jig head, and they had eighth ounce. And so I literally was getting down to the bottom. They were maybe 6 inches or a foot above, and those fish just weren't gonna go for it. But if it's near their face, they're gonna eat it, right? Even if they're not hungry, if they're just predators. Their natural instinct is to take advantage of a situation, and it's our duty to make that situation as easy as possible for them throughout the entire year, but especially during the winter months.
Yeah, yeah, this is just something that is not talked about enough. If you've seen our ladder of importance, the ladder in terms of how we look at it, it's kind of flip-flop from what the tackle industry tells you that it's, oh, just buy more tackle and you just got the wrong rod or reel. You need, better braided line or this new shiny object. And if you're not fishing where the fish are, one, that's the biggest mistake, right? Obviously, you need to be in the 90-10 zone. But after that, it's a lot of these little small things like positioning and casting and making sure that your lure or your live bait or whatever you're using is actually in the water column where the fish are. And I have an interesting story that just happened to me prior to us going out here in the first of the year. We actually left in, I guess it was September when was the hurricane that came that turned you homeless, you and your wife,
Yeah, that was into September.
into
Yep.
September. So we bolted town, just wanted to get away. We had lost power for 7 days in the last one, and we're like, and our house where we live is quick to lose power. It's like, you know what? Let's just go up to the family farmhouse and just get away from it all this time. And it was supposed to be perfect weather there. It was. There's a little pond, so we could fish every day, and we were using this little spinner bait. Okay. And we were crushing them. The bass were loving the spinner more than anything else. So that was end of September. Let's just call it last week of September, early October. Fast forward to Christmas, we went up to the farmhouse. We're only talking about a 2.5 month difference. We go up to the farmhouse, and I still had that spinner. I keep a couple rods there, and I still had it on. I was like, let me try this thing out. Dude, I couldn't get a single bite, not one. And I fished with it for a long time. And finally, guess what I put on the old Ned rig? I had something just super slow that was dragging on the bottom. I mean, we must have caught, and I'm not being sarcastic, I mean, 70, 80 bass over a few day period of time. We were just, it was all on that. They wanted that. They were, even though that spinnerbait, I was getting it low, but it never got within probably 7 inches of the bottom, and they would not touch it. They would not go for it. And someone could have said, "Oh, this pond is dead. There's not a single fish in here." And there's a ton of fish in there. They were all just sitting on the bottom. You're about to say something.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was about to say then, but
Ditch
another story,
pickle, ditch pickle.
yeah, another story came to mind. And that's a big change, right? That's from like one lure to a totally different lure. So like that is a very big swing. And in many cases, the difference is even slighter. So here are two lures. They look pretty similar. One is a quarter ounce, and then one is a 3/16
For
ounce.
those people listening, what are you holding up?
Sorry, yes, the 2.0 rigged on a round eye jig head. And so one is a quarter ounce, one is 3/4 ounce. They look very similar. And these are some that we actually sell. And we purposely made the eyes like this is glow eye, this one's a pearl. So we made which made the colors different so you can actually see the difference in your tackle bag. But long story short, these are the same lures rigged on very similar jig heads. One is just a fraction of an ounce heavier, and that alone can be the difference maker. Our very first podcast that we did when Joe and I are fishing live, I pay very close attention to jig heads, and so I know what I'm using obviously, and I make sure to like know what everybody else is using. And Joe was focused more on entertaining the podcast audience, and I was having a field day with snook, and we were using these exact same lures. I had a quarter ounce, Joe had a 3/16, and I had a field day, and I of course did not tell him what the difference was until the very end. So I think I caught like seven snook to the your like zero, and caught like a ladyfish. And then I finally told him the difference, and he switched to a quarter ounce, and he immediately started getting some fish too. So even very, very slight differences, slight changes in depth control can make a very, very big difference. And that was similar. That was wintertime. And in the wintertime, it's at its most important season. But it's important all season long. But this right now is by far the most important time to really pay attention to depth control. And that last week when we fished, it was right after a cold front, the period that 10 years ago, like we would have dreaded. Like, oh, this, like the fish are going to have
Still
lockjaws, the
kind of
terminals.
dreaded. It was 40 something degrees when we hit the water. It's
Yeah, I
chilly.
would dread it for comfort, but that's now my favorite time to go out and catch fish because they're incredibly predictable. If you follow like our fishing school, that teaches exactly how fish react, and they're incredibly predictable. We had a significant drop in temperature literally the day before we fished, and we had like a 30, 40 catch day. And the only spots that I guess I'll save that the final story for the third tip. But as far as the lures, we caught fish that day, really throughout the day, and we caught them on like five or six different lures, and we changed lures based on depth control. But basically, as long as we had our lure at the right depth, it didn't matter if it was a paddle tail. We caught some on the tweaker as well. We even caught some on the skinny lipper, as long as that lure we were using was appropriate for the depth that they were holding in, we were catching fish. So it wasn't about getting the right color or the specific lure that you have to have. It's really getting a lure to the right depth is key. So I just wanted to really focus on that because that this is the most violated, the most violated, seemingly small change that actually does make a big impact.
Yeah, and same for live bait. I'm
Yeah.
going through. Captain Peter Deeks has been working on this night fishing course for a long time. It's finally ready. It's coming here at the end of January, the end of this month, depending on when you're listening to this. And it's fantastic, by the way. So it covers everything you'd possibly want to know about night fishing, in particular for redfish and trout and snook and flounder. And yeah, he emphasizes that over and over and over again, especially when fishing in inlets and passes at night. Like that's where he's caught some of his biggest fish of his life. And he's like, if you're not on the bottom, you're not going to catch anything. Like the only thing that's at the top are sharks and maybe some jacks. But if you're trying to catch those big bull reds and snook, and you can even see them on your fish finder, they are not at the top. They're not in the middle. They are flat out on that bottom, and you're not going to catch them any other way in any of the passes that he went in and did these little studies in. So it was really good. So depth control is number one that even experienced people make. Number two, what do we got, Luke?
Yeah, I'll just say mismatched equipment,
Mm,
and we'll focus on I would say in my opinion, the most impactful, and it really comes to the rod and reel. Let me get one out for you, and it's basically just not having the right style. You don't have to have a specific one, or it's just so many people, myself for many years, put all the priority on the reel and not on the rod. Where we're getting those combos, and the combo is all about the reel. As hey, I'm not going to pick on the battle, but like the battle is one that comes to mind. The Battle 3 combo, the reel's nice, but the rod is really not that good. The manufacturer is basically delivering as much as they can in the reel, and the rod is kind of whatever's left over. And if you're using live bait, that's okay, you can get away with it. But if you're using lures, that is incredibly hurtful to the actual performance because the rod is what delivers the castability as far as distance and control. More importantly, it's what feels the strikes to let you set the hook at the right time and when you feel that thump, and to not set the hook when you just feel the little taps. To be able to feel the difference between those little pinfish tapping at which point you do not want to set the hook. This is the worst thing you can do. Or as soon as you get that thump from that trout or that red or something that actually can take down the lure, having that feel is incredibly important. And that's very tough to do with the kind of the cheap rods. Like I call them the wet noodle rods, but it's basically those rods. If it says it's unbreakable, that automatically means it's not going to be a good rod for lures. The good rods are going to be breakable. You have to take good care of them, but they take good care of you as long as you take good care of them. So um, long story short, get a nice rod. We have recommendations in the fishing school based on skill level, so that you want to make sure you don't overspend. It basically breaks down different price points and shows exactly which ones we recommend or find something similar. And then whatever budget's left over after the rod, then get a reel. That is much less important than the rod. Stick with spinning. Even the cheap spinning reels will can take a good amount of abuse. And it's surprising how a 50, $60 spinning reel, as long as it's paired with a good rod, you can catch some really good fish with it.
In general, you should probably be spending more money and time on your rod selection than your reel. And it's wild how many people we fish with, how many of our own personal friends and family we fished with over the years. And I don't remember a single person having a nicer rod than us. And I'm not saying that we have these crazy nice rods, but almost every single example I can think of, the person we fish with, friends, family, insider members have had cheaper rods, either that wet noodle, like an ugly stick, not to pick on that brand. It's great for beginners, but it's horrible if you're really trying to use lures and feel the fish and set hooks the right way, or some just broomstick of a rod, like to your point with a pin combo or something where the rod is just an afterthought. And we thought that for the longest time, right? I mean, we spent our all of our yard money savings because that's what we did to make money growing up. It was always, man, what reel can we get? And the rod was kind of, yeah, whatever, $30. We'll slap that on that rod. It's a game, and every time also that we've let them use like a slam stick or a slot machine or even a TFO Pro compared to what they're using, they're like, "Whoa, I can cast so much farther. I feel everything." It's like mind blowing. It changes everything.
And what's funny too is that, give them a setup and like what reel is this? Like I cast so far, what reel is it? Because that's like everybody's mindset. The
Yes,
reel
yes.
spinning reels do not cast the line. The rod casts line. All the reel the only thing you need to worry about with the reel is making sure that this gap is as small as possible, the gap from the line to the lip of the reel. Because all the reel's doing is getting out of the way. The rod is what delivers the lure. The rod is by far the most important aspect. And again, so many people, a vast majority of people get that wrong, as we did for many, many years. Because the ad, the money's in the reels, that's where a lot of the marketing's going. And I think just given the prevalence of ads, it's kind of everybody's top of mind is all about the reel.
Yeah,
So don't
and
make
it's
that
just
mistake.
yeah, it is more exciting. It's kind of like the thing that even as young boys you get fascinated by these reels and all these brand names that come up with these cool things, and there's all these different arrow rotors and mag seals and all these really neat things that are about the reel. And the end of the day, what does it do, right? It casts line and it brings in line. It's got a drag system. It's kind of all it does. And there are even a couple that proclaim that they have line that can shoot off a little bit faster. I don't even know if I believe that. I don't.
Yeah, the gap, you're in control of that. The gap, the smaller the gap from that, was it show before the line to the lip of the spool, the smaller that gap, the less distance that line has to carry, which means you're going to cast further. So it's that is a very big difference. But the smaller that gap is, the more likely you're going to have wind knots too. So it's kind of a catch 22. But as far as the reel too, so last thing, and we'll get on to number three, is another big thing. Again, people spend a lot of money on reels because it has a 20-pound drag or even higher drag, like some crazy high drag pound number. that's meaningless. If we're doing like again typical inshore fishing, we're going after slot size reds, slot size snook, 20 plus inch trout. You don't need to have 20 pounds of drag. That's silly. That actually does more harm than good. You're going to break off on fish. If you're using 10-pound braid or even up to 20-pound braid, you don't need any more than 4 or 5 pounds of drag. And even a little kid's push button rod has 4 or 5 pounds of drag. So you do not need some fancy high-end drag system. You just need to have, again, at least 2 to 4 pounds of drag, which all of them do, and set it properly, and you will not ever break off on a fish. Unless you
Yeah.
get your own structure, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I guess unless you're casting in the trees all day long and you just want to use your drag to break the line, that would be the only reason. Otherwise, just use your hands like a man.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people, yeah, pay a lot of money for these reels with crazy high drag numbers, and it is not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and
All right.
it to your point, it can actually be hurtful if you haven't checked your drag in a while and you had it set too high. Adios. Okay, cool. So that's number two. We'll do a quick recap here. So number one was depth control. Number two was Luke.
Was mismatched equipment.
I would say mismatched rod and reel. And number three is
Yeah, we're good at the map. So number three is going to the trusted spots. So
mm,
trusted spots versus trend spots.
trends.
And I violated this last week when we were out. We were taking Insider Member. I really wanted to get some really good fish, and we stopped at maybe 7 or 8 spots. We caught a bunch of fish, but weren't getting any big ones. And so I was like, okay, we started moving around, and let me share the screen. I'll show you some the type of spot to look for.
Yeah. So, in
Um,
other words, this is going back to your same spots that you fish over and over again because you trust them versus thinking about the actual trends. I mean, we have every Friday, if you don't know, all of our insider members look forward to this, where we do a smart fishing game plan. So, we got smart fishing spots, which is Luke just pulled up. If you're listening, we're on the maps right now. We got smart fishing tides, which is our tide system that shows the best day and tide and even time of day to go fishing. And then you got the game plan where it's all focused on the trends for that week. And we violated it just like so many people do, which is why this is number three.
Yeah, so it's again, it's human nature to have when you have a good experience in a spot that you just want to keep going back to it, going back to it. Okay, I remember I caught fish at this spot. Let's go back, and that's good. That's a spot that we trust. But the trend spot is way more important, and that this trip in particular, we stopped at maybe 8 or 9 spots. We caught fish at all of them but two. And the only two that we didn't catch them were my most trusted spots of all. But this day was after a significant cold front. The wind was coming from the north at a pretty good clip. And both of those trusted spots that were a total bust, they just didn't fit the trends that were happening at that given time. And so regardless of how much you trust the spot, if the feeding trends based on the weather, based on the time of day, obviously the season, even even like this, even the wind direction and just small details like that make a huge difference. And so long story short, always pick your spots based on the feeding trends and don't worry at all about the ones you trust or not. That day in particular, half the spots I've never fished before. And as long as they fit the trends, we caught fish in every single one of them. And again, the two most trusted of all, like I literally drove probably 10 miles to go to one of them and we got skunked. It was a total bust. We would have caught a lot more fish had I just stayed in those other ones. So some tips on getting around that. I'll just show the kind of the trend that was working that day. Obviously, as the weather changes, so do the actual type of trend spot to look for. But this day in particular, we had a wind coming from the north. And the key, after especially a significant cold front, we automatically know that the fish are going to be in the cold spectrum. They're not going to be up in the shallows. So all these shallows that are probably good during the spring, fall, and summer, this would be totally dead. Almost like a 0% chance of catching a good fish in the morning after cold front in a spot like this. But where they'll go is they want to find some deep structure. And with some new technology that we have in smart fishing spots, this became a total. This is why I now love wintertime fishing. It is so easy. with this 1 foot contour layer, it is a absolute game changer. So now with this, I can quickly just zoom around and find the deep structure. As the fish get cold, they just naturally will keep moving around until they find a warm pocket of water, and that's where they're going to be. And so with this 1 foot contour, I can literally scan around without having to go there ever, right? I can just spend 5 minutes of time or less on this with this software and start looking at these docks, knowing that they're looking for deep structure. This one's at 12 feet. This one gets down to about 13 with some big boats over there for some extra shade. But these over here get down to around 13, 12 and a half, 13. So I automatically know that the odds are going to be that the fish are going to be around these docks more so than the other ones. And so you can automatically start writing off the good ones and the bad ones. This dock, let's zoom in on this one. Yeah, this one's only in, so that's probably 6 or 7 feet of water. So that this is unlikely to hold nearly as many fish as this one, which is right next to that hole. So the fish won't often, if it's extremely cold, they go off in the middle of the hole, but usually they'll be off. All the fish in this zone will shift off to these deepest docks, or I should say the deepest structure, which in this case happens to be docks. And it's easy, right? Like in about a minute, we basically dissected that on a north wind, these docks are going to be holding the fish. So that's simple. And then go out there and fish it and make sure that your rigging has something that's heavy enough to get down to the bottom where
Yes.
those fish are going to be holding. They're not going to be mid level. They're going to be on the bottom.
Don't be using your top water, your skinny lippers. Get it down. I would be using the prawn, which caught a lot of fish. So did just the old Slam Shady Mulligan and the 2.0 on a heavy enough jig head. That was
Yep.
the key.
Yep. So that's it. Yeah, and just keep those rules in top of mind, and that will significantly decrease the odds of getting skunked, and it'll increase the odds of catching slams. Like again, after that cold front, I think we caught it's like 8 or 9 different species. So we caught snook reds, or granted, we had 2 reds get off of the boat, so we can't really count them, but we had snook, trout, flounder, snook, cudas, mangrove snapper,
Uh,
lizardfish, ladyfish, of course.
Ladyfish, Jack.
Jack.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
lots of tight lines on a day that started off in the 40s. I mean, for a Floridian, that's brutal cold. Um, but
This was
yeah,
a
it was all about, and we screwed up a lot of these. One of us did at some point in the day, right? And once we kind of dialed it back in, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, so the spot that I didn't, on the pre-trip plan, I was using the 1 foot contour, and I was picking out spots just like that, and that all held fish. And the trusted spot that I drove 10 miles for, that's the one I didn't bother with. And then we get there, and it was a negative tide too, so it was cold and a negative tide, so it was all about the deep pockets. And I just violated the most obvious trend of all after cold front, and spent like an hour of our time plus a bunch of gas going to a total dead zone. I felt like an idiot afterwards. I literally did a game plan that told me not to do that, and but that spot was so trusted in my mind that I had to go there, and that the trusted versus trends is a mistake that all of us make, and it's something that can waste. I don't know how much gas I wasted by going there, but I definitely wasted an hour or two of all of our time for that.
Hmm.
Sorry about that, Joe.
You're forgiven. You're forgiven. Cool. Well, if you guys want to have trends on exactly where to go fish every week, come join us in the Insider Club. And if you are a member, make sure to get in the community. Make sure you're looking at the emails every Friday morning. So the first email we send out every Friday, and usually it's pretty early, like 7, 8. Sometimes we'll even have them Thursday in the community if you happen to be already, hitting the road really early Friday morning. But yeah, we've got coaches now all over, and we got them in Texas and Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia, Virginia, and these coaches are people who are on the water every single week, and they're reporting, "Hey, here's exactly what is working right now." So it's like having real time trends, like having a full time fishing guide in your back pocket. And it was cool. The member we went out with, we were asking him, "Hey, what are your favorite things?" And he mentioned that quickly. I was like, "Oh man, the game plan and the app are like two things I basically just kind of rely on. I could do all of it in 10 minutes or less before every trip, and it saves me so much time. So make sure to use those. And that's on top of tackle discounts and the free tackle we're sending out every month to test out, and all the other cool perks of being a member. It really, really is powerful. Trends over the trusted spots. And at some
Yeah.
point, you'll have a whole lot more trusted spots because you've, explored more and you use trends to go find really, really good spots all year long.
Yeah, and one thing too, I forgot to show or mention that on the software, that Smart Fishing Spots, it's both an app and we have a web version as well. That's for members. Members, you get it free access to both. So on that 1 foot contour, which is amazing for deep water, when I'm fishing areas like this, like residential areas, I look for deep docks because that's usually going to be the deepest structure. But if fishing areas with that's less populated, like a lot of the Carolinas, we have a lot of members who are using the oyster layer. So there's a layer on there for oysters. I use it during most of the year, at least the warm periods of the year. But in the wintertime, you can use the oyster layer on top of the 1 foot contour, and now you can see the deepest oyster beds in whichever zone that you're fishing, and that is usually the recipe for those types of zones. So whether you're looking at docks or oysters, or we have various different satellite maps in there, this software has been the biggest game changer that I've ever had for consistently going out and catching slams, even in conditions that most people don't like to fish. As long as you follow those trends, and we obviously give you the strategies on putting it all together, just follow that, and you'll be surprised at how easy it is. It is not the lure; it's about getting the right spot and just getting some lure down to the right depth and catching a ton of fish. Yeah, we'll have that. I'll have that video out probably shortly after this goes live, but it'll be a good one. You'll see us freezing out there catching some fun fish.
Cool. All right. Well, come join us. It's over at saltstrong.com. Insider members, make sure to go to community.saltstrong.com. We give away over a couple $1,000 every month of just free tackle for just being in the community. It's a big giveaway we do every single month. So a lot of cool things happening over in the community. And now the live chapters every month. It just keeps going on and getting better and better. So come join us there at saltstrong.com. Appreciate you guys. Leave any questions or comments down below. Peace. We out.
See ya.